Okay. Call the Civil Service Commission meeting to order.
Just a reminder, make sure you speak in your mic and you turn it on whenever you're talking. Thank you. Same thing for the podium. If somebody comes up to speak, just make sure your mic's on and you speak in the mic. Thank you.
Approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. Everybody had a chance to look at those?
Yes, I move we approve.
Second.
Okay. All in order is all approved? Aye.
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 Next thing is the daily action log. Hopefully you had a chance to look at those.
I did add 2 additional lines on there from the ones that I emailed that happened after I sent those out. So everything on 6/16 has been added since last week.
Oh, okay.
I move we approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Moving on to consideration of appeals in regard to the driver's promotional examination. Consideration of appeals in questions 41 and 96.
Yes, thank you. Okay, we've got, just like all the other appeals, we've got a presentation for you, and we'll go through each one of those. Each of these questions originally had 2 appeals. After reviewing the test writer's responses, did that change, Christine?
Yes, we had 1 drop their appeal for 96, so only 1 remains.
So we have 2 people appealing question 41 and 1 person appealing question 96. Go ahead. Thank you. Okay, so question 41. As it appears in the exam, question 41 through 60 were taken from Safety and Survival on the Fireground, 2nd edition, Fire Engineering, ISBN 9781-59370-1493. Select the best answer for question 41 through 60 based solely upon the material presented in this source. Question 41, the author lists the 15 most dangerous firefighting tactics in descending order from extremely dangerous down to dangerous. Collapse rescue operations were considered the most dangerous, while blank was considered the least dangerous on the list. Page 6 through 7. Answer A is responding and returning to alarms. B is operating above a fire. C is cellar fires, and D is overhauling. The correct answer is D, overhauling. And the test writer response is as follows. This question comes from page 6 and 7. The author states, the list that follows gives 15 dangerous fireground tactics identified as among the most dangerous duties a firefighter can perform at a fire. Number 1 on the list is collapse rescue operations. Number 15 on the list is overhauling. The very next sentence following the list of dangerous fireground tactics states, these firefighting tactics are rated as to degree of risk on the basis of the following criteria. At that point, the author goes on to explain each of the 10 different criteria used to rate each of the dangerous fireground tactics identified in the list of 1 through 15. Though the author never specifically states the list is in descending order from extremely dangerous tactics down to dangerous tactics, however, he did state that they were rated as to degree of risk, which I feel implies that they were listed in order from number 1, most dangerous tactics, down to number 15, being a less dangerous tactic. Question 41 has only 1 correct answer, D, overhauling. You're good there, Lorelei. That's okay. Chief, if you've got some comments.
Yeah, our thoughts are with this. If you look on page 5 of the book, there it starts at the bottom paragraph. It says there are degrees of danger in firefighting. In order for a firefighter to survive the dangers of firefighting, he or she must know how others firefighters have died or been seriously injured, and references figure 1-6, which is that page there, the picture. To survive firefighting, firefighters must know how others have died. And then it says the list that follows gives 15 dangerous fireground tactics identified as among the most dangerous duties a firefighter can perform at a fire. And then it gives the number one, collapse, all the way through overhaul being the least. So our opinion is that we agree with the test writer that the answer is correct.
We do have members in the audience. If you wish to come up and speak about question 41, you may do so at this time.
So, I know you all looked at
Thank you.
So I printed out a couple pages that I want to get to. So starting on page 6, it does say, the very first sentence says the list that follows gives 15 dangerous fireground tactics identified as the most dangerous. So that's telling me right there that all 15 of these are considered to be the most dangerous out of all the tactics that a firefighter can do at a scene. While you look through there, and it's, as the test writer says, all 15 of these are based on, after number 15, it says these firefighting tactics are rated as to a degree of risk on the basis of the following criteria. So, to me, that's just explaining, like, these criteria are just basically explaining why these 15 are all equally the most important or most dangerous. As far as the criteria, I mean, if I myself chose responding and returning to alarms. So, and the reason for that is because if you look at page 10 that I had scanned in there, it says while responding and returning to alarms is not actually a firefighting tactic, it does kill 25% of all firefighters in the line of duty. Which, yes, that does make it a dangerous tactic. But then on page 11, it also has fighting wildland fires as the second greatest killer of all firefighters after residential fires. So that's why, and his list has wildfires as number 9 and responding and returning to alarms is number 2. That's why I don't feel like they are technically in any specific order. And then on the list of the following criteria that he's quoting here, it has the 4th consideration as a firefighting tactic performed inside an enclosed space where there's danger of gas buildup and explosion presents a higher degree of risk than a tactic outside in an enclosed space. Well, overhauling is performed inside an enclosed area where there's confined gases. So based on the criteria, I don't see how any of these are in any specific order. It's just, to me, they're stating that they're all equally dangerous, and that the reason I chose the answer that I did was because of, like I said, on page 10, it says that responding to and returning from alarms is not actually a tactic.
I would also like to note that although the test writer did have a definitive answer and stated it in his response, he did also mention that he will not be including this question in any future exams because he doesn't want there to be any confusion. So take that for what it's worth as well.
Somebody else speak.
Good morning. My name is Martin Gwynn. I would like to challenge question 41. I'll start off by saying nowhere in page 6 does it state that the 15 fireground tactics are listed in descending order from extremely dangerous to dangerous. Even the test writer admits this in his response. I boldly claim nowhere in the book does it state that it is listed from extremely dangerous to dangerous. The test rider's response states, which I feel implies. One interpretation of this list could be, in no particular order, here are the top 15 fireground tactics that are following, and the following is the criteria used to identify them among the most dangerous duties as firefighters can perform at a fire. Both interpretations are subjective. One opinion is of the test rider, the other the test taker. Is the test taker expected to know what the test rider feels is being implied? Maybe a better test question over this list would have been, which of these is not one of the most dangerous firefighter tactics? I have prepared, if I may present them to you, some packets for you. Apologize,
Thank you.
we'll be doing a lot of page flipping. Figured it might be easier than flipping through the book itself. The question states that the author lists the 15 fireground tactics in a certain order. If you go over to the third page, which should be a copy of page 6, and I apologize, I'm going to be repeating some of what Jordan Taylor has already stated. The highlighted states, the list that follows gives 15 dangerous fireground tactics identified as among the most dangerous duties a firefighter can perform. Nowhere does it say that it is listed in a certain order. If you flip over to the next page, page 7, highlighted, these firefighting tactics are rated as a degree of risk on the basis of the following criteria. The word rated does not mean descending order. Fire extinguishers are rated, but that doesn't mean a Class A fire extinguisher is better than any of the other classifications. Again, these are two subjective interpretations. Is the test taker supposed to know what the test rider is implying, what the test rider feels is being implied? To possibly understand what the author may be implying, I refer you to the first page of that packet that I handed you. In the foreword, it states that the author's conscience is clear. Every fireground hazard, danger, risk, peril, and threat imaginable is described here. And as in the first edition, an attempt to categorize the hazards and tactics used in the fire environment according to their relative dangers and risks. If you'll flip the page, I apologize, my copy already got out of order. You'll have a copy of the preface, and it states, "Do not accept all these firefighting hazards as the most dangerous for your department." Further down highlighted, record your tactics and dangers according to the relative risks and frequencies of occurrence in your community. Arrange them in a scale of relative risks and dangers. Create your own fire department risk frequency scales. Identify the firefighter hazards, fire dangers associated with each tactic, and then develop your own firefighter safety and survival techniques. The author didn't state that this list was in any order because he wanted fire departments to go out and create their own list and prioritize it for their department. Let's take a look at the criteria for coming up with the 15 dangerous fireground tactics. I ask you to pull up pages 7 and 8. Seven and 8 lists the 10, in no order, lists the 10 criteria for coming up with that, with the 15 most dangerous, with the 15 dangerous tactics. That's a lot to go over. We're not going to skim through it, or that's a lot to read right now, unless y'all would like to take the time to read it. In the criteria, the listing does not make any reference to driving, which is what entry 2, responding and returning to alarms, is referring to. And based off of that, the book doesn't even follow its own criteria for being considered one of the firefighting tactics. Now, I will state, if you flip over to page 10 in that packet, to summarize what I've highlighted on page 10, the reason why they have responding and returning to alarms listed is based off of the number of line of duty deaths. But again, that doesn't follow the criteria that they have set for creating this list. Like my colleague mentioned earlier, page 11, which is the page after page 10 that I had referenced, it states, fighting wildfires is the second greatest killer of firefighters. Why is the second greatest killer of firefighters listed number 9 if this is in descending order? And again, I do apologize for the constant back and forth of flipping through these pages. If you'll flip back forward to page 9, it will show a figure 1-7. Figure 7 illustrates the 15 dangerous fireground tactics based on the degree of risk and frequency. Highlighted down below on page 9, the matrix shows at glance some firefighting tactics do present greater risk than others. Before page 9 on page 8 starts a statement, other firefighting tactics can be added to this matrix and the risk level assigned to a task can be changed, moved to a higher or lower position. Page 9 also states, it is best to remember that firefighting hazards and risk change constantly. If you were to ask 10 people to look over figure 1-7 and you asked them to create a list based off of what is most dangerous to least dangerous, you would not have 10 identical lists. You would not have 10 lists that match up the 15 that they have listed in the book. If you flip over to page 13, there is no fireground tactic that does not present the danger of death or injury to a firefighter. However, some firefighting tactics do present greater risk than others. The 15 dangerous firefighting tactics listed above illustrate more clearly the varying degrees of risk and dangers to firefighter. Again, page 13 does not state that the 15 are listed in any particular order. All this justifies why the 15 dangerous tactics listed on page 7 are not in particular order. If the author wanted to put this list in order, I believe he would have done so. If you'll put before you the last 3 pages that I have provided in that packet, should be pages 360, 361, and 399. I'll give you all a moment to quickly look over those. Each 3-page shows a list, one being the frequency of danger on page 61, and it clearly states that this list is listed from most frequent to least frequent. So does page 399. The following reads, "The following list gives safety actions an incident commander may order after receiving a report of a fire environment danger. These actions are based upon the seriousness of danger reported, and they progress from simple to extreme." There is an order to these lists. So I can't seem to find my copy of page 360, but it is another list of that clearly states this list follows from most dangerous to least dangerous, 1 being the higher priority, 13 being the lower priority. Originally, I was challenging question 41, that there was no order to the 15 dangerous tactics and that all answers were correct because the answers provided were on the list of the 15. After submitting my challenge and reviewing the material in preparation for this meeting, overall, this is just a bad question. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yes.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Cody Harris. I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I did get the question right. I do agree with the test writer. The great Chief Dunn, the other great Chief Dunn that wrote this book was with FDNY. He is very black and white. This book is for seasoned firefighters. It is not for the general public. If anybody that was not in the fire service was to read this book, they wouldn't understand much of it. So, could you go to the test question itself for me? Thank you. We do see this list, and y'all have looked at it. We have these 15 tactics that are dangerous. Every one of them is dangerous. And then what he states is, these firefighting tactics are rated as to a degree of risk on the basis that follows the criteria. Well, there's a list that follows that criteria. Okay, so number 1, a firefighting tactic that is performed before the initial attack hose line is in operation. That's pretty dangerous. Well, that could be operating above a fire if you were doing a search. Number 2, a firefighting tactic carried out in close proximity to flames. Well, you know, that's pretty dangerous too. A firefighting tactic performed inside an enclosed space where there's a dangerous gas buildup and explosion. Pretty dangerous. Number 5, a firefighting tactic performed inside a burning building has a higher collapse risk than a tactic performed outside a burning building. Number 6, a firefighting tactic that is carried on the early stage of a fire. And this goes in order through 10, and the severity gets different. So let's talk about our answers. We have responding and returning to alarms. The guys before me have proven that that's dangerous. We look at operating above a fire. If you enter a 2-story building and the first floor is on fire and you are in the 2nd story, you don't have to be a seasoned firefighter to realize this is a bad spot to be in. Cellar fires. We don't have the opportunity to have a lot of cellars around here, but when you read these books and the people up north, cellar fires are dangerous. They're hard to fight, they're below grade, they have usually 1 entry and 1 exit. And you have a lot of weight above you. It's a dangerous situation. Overhauling. Most people in this room don't know what overhauling is. When you're going to overhaul a fire, it's basically searching for hot spots. The fire's been knocked down. We have control of the scene. We're cleaning up, we're moving furniture outside, things of that nature. I believe that it is implied. I believe that the book, chapter 2 through 16, are in the order of his tactics throughout the book. And if you read the book, it gets less severe every chapter. I appreciate y'all's time. I ask y'all to keep the question the way it is. Thank you.
Chief Fisher, do you have anything else to add? Are you good?
No, ma'am.
I know Brian's going to put some firefighter expertise to the question, so before he does that, I want to tell you my initial observations of this question. Some of the wording I have a problem with. Probably the biggest problem I have is the fact that the test writer is saying it's an okay question, but I'm never going to use it again. That indicates a problem to me. As far as the charts and the graphs and the book, y'all are exactly right. This is well above my head. And this is probably the hardest question I've ever had to deal with on this commission. And so that's just my initial take, and I'm going to turn it over to Raul and Brian and see what they say.
Go ahead. You
All
have the
right.
most-
Looking at the question and the way I looked at it from the point when you're listing those things, it says these tactics are rated as to the degree of risk on the basis of the following criteria. You can apply more than one of those criteria to each one of those things. And I think the more criteria you apply, the more dangerous it is. I didn't even see this deal till Martin brought this thing here, but this, and I can't remember the name of the chart, but the one that's on page 9 talks about low risk, low frequency, high risk, high frequency. The only one of those 4 answers that is in low risk is overhaul. And the question asked, which would make it low risk, is certainly less dangerous than high risk. The only thing that would, because the question states officer lists 15 most dangerous firefighting tactics in descending order from extremely dangerous down to dangerous. Collapse operations were considered the most dangerous, while blank was considered the least dangerous. The only one of those answers on those 4 that was low risk was overhaul. So all the rest of those were in the high risk category on this chart. Like I said, the other part of that was you can apply those things, and if you look at some of the things that he applied, it says the first thing, a firefighter tactic performed before initial attack of a hose line. Well, those on the list, 3 of those things, because number 4 is advancing attack hose line, 3 of those things are listed above that. And when it's talked about as rated as to the degree of risk, I know that's not a specific thing, but they're still talking about the degree of risk. So that is I would call it a descending order, but I mean, it doesn't specifically state that. That's kind of my analysis of that.
Well, this is definitely above my expertise here, but listening to both my colleagues and presentation you guys have, and then what this writer said, it does kind of make me wonder if this is really the question we want to keep in here. So we're going to have a little vote here.
You need a motion?
Go ahead.
I make a motion to keep the question as is, based on the 2 things that I stated. One, the chart, one of the 4 answers, because the question specifically asked which was considered the least dangerous. And the overhaul answer is the only one that is in the low risk category in this chart. So if you go through that, you can eliminate that down, even if you aren't using the other list. And it is on the bottom of the list too, so there is some correspondence from that chart to that list. Correlation.
additional info from your side there, Keith, before we,
Like I said, I can see it both ways. If I look at it from just a common sense, if I was taking the test, I can understanding the terminology, I had to ask Brian what overhauling was. I would say, yeah, D is the least dangerous. At the same time, the way the book is written is a bit confusing, and again, that may be my lack of fire knowledge. I'm gonna what's your thoughts?
well,
I'm going to defer to Brian on this one, just because of his expertise. But I would like it noted that if this question does show up again,
we won't.
we got a problem with the test writer. I don't, if the test writer is saying, yeah, this is a confusing question, it sort of reminds me of that question we had on the police exam where we had 15 people finding a problem with the question. That indicates, even though we let that question sit, it indicates there's a problem with the question.
Let me ask this, do you guys have the data? So on question, what is that, 41? Mm-hmm. How many people took the test?
31,
How many got that question right?
20 got it correct.
20 out of 31?
31.
Yes, sir.
So we do need a second to Mr. Dunn's motion, if there is one.
So your motion is to stand,
To leave the question?
leave the question as is.
As is.
I think,
There's no doubt that these 15 are the most dangerous. The book even references that you can add and take away from this list. If you refer back into the preface, the second sentence, and that should also be just below the highlight that I have. The book examines the 15 tactics and 13 fireground environment dangers of a typical large northeastern urban fire department. There's no argument that there's a degree of whether something is more dangerous than others. They're all dangerous. But nowhere does it list that one is extremely dangerous and one is just dangerous. They base their 15 off of where the author comes from. If we were to base one here from San Angelo, we'd probably have a similar list, but it's not going to be in the exact same order. And the author wrote this that to the fire departments to come up with your own list and prioritize based off of your own community.
thank you. Well, I can see both sides.
Well, the question does say, select the best answer based solely on the material presented in the source. And granted, he does not use the wording
Yeah.
extremely dangerous down to dangerous. That's probably the main problem I have with that. But then he does say collapse rescue operations were considered the most dangerous. So he's giving you a clue there. based on the 15 criteria. If collapse rescue operations is number one and is the most dangerous, then conversely, the bottom of the list, overhauling, would be the least dangerous. So the way, I think it's a bad question overall. I'm going to second that we just leave it as is. But again, I think it should be noted that that question probably needs to be reworded or removed for future tests just because of the confusion.
And I think there's some semantics in the words there, but if you look at that list and you look at that chart on page 9, figure 1-7, those 8 listed on the right side under high risk are the first 8 in that list. The lower risk ones, all these from number 9 on down are on the low risk side.
Right, yeah, the chart.
So, and the question asks, and there's only one of those 4 answers that are on the low risk side. And the question asks, which one is the least dangerous? So
Right.
it's not like there was 2 of them over there and then you're trying to figure that out. There's only one answer over on the low risk side.
Okay. So, all in favor of keeping the question as is?
Aye.
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 And guys, like I said, appreciate the research, and we understand, where you're coming from, absolutely. Like I said, this is the hardest question I've had to deal with.
Okay, thank you. We are going to question 96, which was also appealed. Question 96, as it appears on the exam. Questions 81 through 100 were taken from San Angelo Fire Department Standard Operating Guidelines, SOGs. Select the best answer for questions 81 through 100 based solely upon the material presented in this source. Question 96 reads, following 2 unsuccessful attempts to place an endotracheal tube, or if it appears that an endotracheal tube would be unsuccessful, use of the King airway should be considered. Which of the following are contradictions for the use of the King airway? SOG section 500.45, King airway. 1, patients who are unconscious or have an intact gag reflex. 2, patients under 4 feet in height. 3, obese patients weighing over 350 pounds. 4, patients with known cardiac disease. Answer A, only statements 1 and 3. Answer B, only statements 1, 2, and 4. Answer C, only statements 1 and 2. Answer D, only statements 1, 2, and 3. The correct answer listed by the test writer is C. In his response, indications endotracheal intubation provides a definitive airway. Every attempt should be made to secure an airway with an endotracheal tube. Following 2 unsuccessful attempts to place an endotracheal tube, or if it appears that an endotracheal tube would be unsuccessful, use of the King airway should be considered. Contradictions. Patients who are conscious or have an intact gag reflex, patients under 4 feet in height, patients with known esophageal disease. I don't know how to pronounce most of those words, so I'll go to the next one. Ingestion of caustic substances, administering medications via the King airway down the tube. Findings, I agree with the appellates. Question 96 is invalid. Question 96 is invalid because it has no correct answer choices. As written, statement number 1 is not a contradiction for the use of the King airway. It should have stated patients who are conscious or have an intact gag reflex instead of unconscious. Since each of the answers provided include statement number 1, there are no correct choices. I feel question 96 should be removed from the exam or all test takers be given credit. Chief, do you have?
Yeah, so the fire department, we We agree with the test writer since one of the answers was patient who it should have said conscious, but it says unconscious, which is hugely different. So therefore, making that question invalid because there is no correct answer. So we agree with the test writer that this should be removed from the test.
Chief, do you prefer credit be given, or?
Well, actually, I didn't even see that be given till just this now. My thoughts are it's a bad question, and it should just be removed.
So my thoughts on this is whenever I take an exam, I analyze the answers as much as the content in the answers. Every one of those choices had selection number one, statement number one. Statement number one at that point is irrelevant because it's in every one of the choices. So I don't analyze statement one at all. Now, my recommendation for this question in particular is all applicants give credit for every one. Basically, not throwing the test question out, but giving credit to all test takers. That's my recommendation.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to make a comment?
Good morning. My name is Casey Scruggs. Thank you all for having me here. I've been with the Snaresville Fire Department for 3 years now. Home station is Station 2, A shift. Originally, I was just going to reiterate the fact of what the test writer had to say. All I can really do is give my opinion while taking the test. While taking the test, I noted that statement number one, I was reading the question down, note that statement number one said the words unconscious and intact gag reflex. It was insinuating that was a contraindication to a King airway. Immediately when I read that, I thought that should say conscious. They're trying to trip me up. I won't select statement number one. Now, going down, reading the rest of it, and then reading all the answers, seeing that statement number one was in every single answer, it didn't click in my head that statement number one had to be right. So it really broke my ego down right there. I made an educated guess after that. I should have made a better educated guess. I don't remember which one I actually picked. It was not C, though. Statement number one should say conscious, not unconscious. And like the test writer said, it makes every single answer incorrect. In my opinion, I think it should be thrown out because while you're taking the test, there's no way, if you take a test like me, there's no way to make a good guess at that. Thank y'all for this time.
Hello again, I'm Cody Harris. When I read this question, it was puzzling because the test writer is very, very good. He trips you up everywhere you can go. And like Casey here, I noticed that was missing out of the statement. Can I go back to the SOG, please, that we have? And what we have here, I think, is he made a typo or a misspelling with the unconscious. And the other problem we have is we have an outdated SOG. So more medical terminology like we had fire earlier, we have patients who are conscious and have an intact gag reflex. The truth is, conscious should have never been in this statement. So what we're talking about is an airway that protects you from aspirating your stomach contents if you cannot keep that from happening. So this device will go over your larynx and it protects your lungs from anything that might go in there. It helps us to help you breathe. You cannot use this device on anybody that has a gag reflex. If the test question said you have arrived at an alien spacecraft and there's 2 Martians on the ground, can you insert this airway on them if they have a gag reflex? It doesn't matter. You cannot do it. I believe everybody should get credit for this question. He's very good at the way he does things. Number one wasn't every answer choice, so that was puzzling when you break it down. Thank y'all.
Hello again. I oppose the challenge of question 96. The instructions for the question state, read the question and give the best answer. No doubt there is an error in question 96, and the test writer admits that it was an error. Question 96, the first option choice is in every answer, which makes option 1 irrelevant in choosing the best answer, therefore giving option 1 no bearing on the correct answer. The best answer comes down to a process of elimination. The only correct contraindication listed is patients under 4 feet in height, which is option 3. When you omit the other options because they are not contraindications, you are only left with one answer. The best answer is still C, whether there is an error or not. If you corrected the error from to conscious, yes, if you remove from unconscious, answer C is still the best correct answer. In option 1, if you change the word or for the word with, answer C is still the best correct answer. In question 96, if you remove the first option from all the answer choices, answer C is still the best answer. Clearly, there is an error in option 1, clearly the error in option 1 has no effect on the correct answer, and because option 1 is in each answer choice, option 1 is irrelevant in choosing the best answer. Question 96 is being challenged for no correct answer. I argue that there is only one correct answer. Question 96 is not a bad question, it just has a typo that has no bearing on coming up with the best correct answer. If a test question read a apparatus where the question should read an apparatus, do you throw that question out because of the typo, or do you award the best correct answer, fix the typo for future tests? It is my understanding that a majority of the test takers answer C. Do we have that data?
23 got it correct.
So, majority of the test takers were able to look past this error and answer the correct answer. Those that answered differently did not thoroughly read the question and statements, or they did not know the material enough to give the best answer. On the subject of contraindications, like Cody Harris presented, I'm a paramedic, he's a paramedic. All the firefighters here, Chief Dunn is a paramedic. It doesn't matter if the patient is conscious or unconscious. You hear the words intact gag reflex, you're not going to put a King airway or any airway adjunct down the patient's throat. The words intact gag reflex stated at the end of option 1 overrules any prior statement error. Again, this is not a matter of no correct answers, because there's only one correct answer, answer C, the best answer. Thank you.
I'd like to say something. I'm sorry. I would like to change my response after hearing that. After listening to their comments, I do agree that those that got that correct should be given credit instead of being removed.
I just wanted to add that it's kind of an unfair comparison to say it was a typo per se. It's not a difference between who and whom or a and an, because that's not when you're reading that, it doesn't make a big difference in your mind. Now it's a complete different word. Adding the un to the unconscious makes it a complete different definition. So when reading through this question before you even look at the answers, reading patients who are unconscious, and when you know in the SOG it states are conscious, it's a contraindication, throws you off from the start. So you immediately take that statement number 1 and throw it off to the side. It's no longer valid. Now, when going through the answers and you see that statement number 1 is there, it gets confusing to you. As a test taker, you think back, man, I didn't know that well enough, I guess. I guess it is unconscious. And you're not sure about anything else on the SOG. That's all I have to say.
Again, when you look at options 1, 2, and 3, there's, outside of statement 1, which is listed in all of the answer choices, option 2 is the only other correct contraindication. So if you thought 3 and 4 were the correct answer, you were wrong. You cannot choose answer A because 3 is wrong, clearly wrong according to our SOGs. You cannot choose an answer that has answer option 4 because it is clearly not in our SOGs. Other than option 1, which has a typo, patients under 4 feet is the only other contraindication, leaving answer C still the only best correct answer.
Gentlemen, I was confused earlier. I agree with that, statement C is the only correct.
So I have a question, whether it's one of the chiefs or Brian can answer this. On number 1, where it says patients who are unconscious or have an intact gag reflex, and I know we talked about that a little bit earlier. How much weight does the or have?
Well, that should be conscious. So if you're conscious
You do have.
or gag reflex, if you're conscious, you're going to have a gag reflex. If you're unconscious, odds are you're not going to have a gag reflex. So that being unconscious messes the whole question up, because if you're unconscious, you will not have a gag reflex.
So they basically counter each other.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
May I
Casey.
add that if you are unconscious, you can still have an intact gag reflex. There's varying degrees of consciousness. In paramedic school, you learn that if you stick an OPA or a King airway, so-called, if you stick a King airway in a patient's mouth and they are unconscious and they start to gag, you pull that King airway right out. So just because you are unconscious does not necessarily mean that you will have an intact gag reflex. There's varying degrees.
Okay.
And I agree to that, yeah. But there's not an absolute, but most of the time, if you're unconscious, you're unconscious, so you do not. But there are probably times you could be unconscious with a gag reflex, correct?
Again, whether conscious or unconscious, if the patient has an intact gag reflex, which yes, if they're conscious, they're going to have a gag reflex. If they're unconscious and have an intact gag reflex, it's a contraindication. That is just simply a typo. The condition of the patient really doesn't matter. It's, do they have an intact gag reflex, which overrules the error in option 1.
How many people put C as their correct answer again?
23.
20 something?
23.
Yes, sir, 23
23 out of
put
31.
C, correct.
What do you feel?
Well, my thinking is, again, trying to be consistent. That my initial leaning is to leave the question as is, let it stand.
Let it stand as far as C is the answer.
Correct.
So initially, I was looking at chunk the question.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's a typo. I think he just screwed up and put unconscious instead of conscious. But the thing that I would say out of that, number one is included in every answer. So even so, if number one is there, it's going to be in every answer. So let's just take that portion of that out. The next part is kind of the case that Martin's making. You look at the rest of them. Well, the only contraindication included in there is the under 4 feet tall. So if you mark the other two, you didn't know that they weren't contraindications to using a King Airway. So I would agree with you and leave the question as answer C. Because if you take the, he screwed up putting unconscious, but one is included in every answer.
True.
So there's no way around it. You're going to mark that in there. So now you're down to figuring out, is it 2, 3, or 4 that is your contraindication? And two is the patients under 4 feet is the contraindication under the protocol or the SOG. So the other two are not listed as contraindications on there. So B and D would not be correct for sure. And one, whether, if it was the other way, it's in every one, so I would assume that to be correct if I was looking at that, and it is in every answer. If one is going to be one, so which one of the other ones is the correct answer? So I would agree with you, leave the question as one.
So the motion is that C would be the correct answer.
Right. I move that we keep the question, C will be the correct answer.
I'll second. In favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And that concludes our meeting today. I adjourn.